Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Steve Fontana, and along with Kathy Graves, my colleague, we are the co-deputy directors of economic development for the city of New Haven. We'd like to welcome you to this webinar to talk about phase 2 reopening in the city of New Haven. Along with me, we have a number of guests and panelists, and we'll be introducing them shortly. Want to just lay out a couple of brief bits of information. We are recording this, so we will have it available for anybody who would like to see it afterwards. In addition, we will look to post it on YouTube. We also will be taking questions for a Q&A at the end of the presentation. So please feel free to use the chat box to enter questions, and Kathy or Maritza or I will be able to read off the questions for the panelists to answer in the order in which you enter them. Finally, the purpose of today's webinar is to talk about specific elements of phase 2 reopening as it relates to indoor dining at restaurants, nail salons, tattoo parlors, gymnasiums, fitness centers, and yoga studios. Obviously, there are many categories of businesses that can reopen starting on Wednesday, and they're all very important, and we'd be happy to try to get you additional information if it's not covered in this webinar on your particular industry or sector. Before I turn over to Kathy to talk a little bit about the general state certification and reopening guidelines, and before we go to our panelists, I'd like to introduce them to let you know who we have on the call. We have Maritza Bond, the director of the city's health department. We have Jim Tercio, the city building official. And we have Jennifer Forsland, who is the fire marshal for the city of New Haven. So with that, I do have Kathy's presentation on screen. Hopefully you all can see that. So Kathy, if you'd like, I can proceed through it with you while you speak to it, and then we'll turn over to Maritza.
Okay, and I'm just going to, good morning, everyone. I'm just going to highlight those business categories that will be reopening on the 17th. They're outlined here. However, today we're going to focus on indoor dining and personal services. So let's go to the next slide. One of the most important parts of this reopening is ensuring that you understand the rules. The rules can be found at this link. Steve, will you please click that link? It's on the DECD website. It's not working.
It's not working too great, so let's
Okay.
not.
All right.
Let's not do that.
Link, I'm sorry. The link will take you right to the DECD website, and it outlines the rules per business category, which is very, very important to understand and be comfortable with. Additionally, slide 3, I'm just going through these quickly because I know you want to hear from our health director and our building director and our fire marshal. So I'm highlighting something that's really important. And New Haven is slow at this point, and we really need to boost up that self-certification. It's very important. The links take you to the DECD website. The application is very straightforward. It's very easy to self-certify, but it's very important that you get that badge and you post that badge and that poster that they will provide you with once you self-certify. Next slide. This slide gives you examples of indoor dining. It takes you right to the page, and it outlines the rules that you need for indoor dining. And this is just an example for restaurants, but it's very, very important that you understand the rules, because there will be inspections, and these inspections will be referring back to these rules. So whenever you have a question, go to the DECD website and review the rules. And with that, I'll have Maritza come in and talk about the rules.
Good morning, everyone. Is there a specific sector that you want me to begin with? Should I start with indoor dining?
I would ask Maritza, if you wouldn't mind, please start with indoor dining, yes.
Right.
Absolutely, we'll do so. All righty, let's get started.
There you
So
go.
good morning, everyone. Thank you for being on the call today. As you know, we are preparing to open up for the next phase of our reopening. And so there are a lot of planning that goes underway. And we wanted to make sure we have the opportunity to be here today to talk a little bit about what those new rules are, and then also allow for opportunity for Q&A from our task force team. So I'm just really pleased to be joined by my task force members, Jim Tershow and Jennifer from our fire marshal office, as we do a lot of collective and teamwork to ensure that we're doing the best to our ability to provide some education and wellness visits at different sectors. And so this information session should allow you to ask questions from our team, and then we will try our best to answer those questions. If we do not have a response at this juncture, we will certainly inquire with our respective state contacts to ensure that we're being consistent with our messaging. And so with that being said, what I hope to accomplish this morning is really to talk about what the operational reopening requirements are, to talk about what the indoor dining room and new restroom requirements inspection processes are going to be, and then talk about the health and safety measures, both for your customers and your employees. Within the reopening guide that was issued by DECD, requires that 50% of the establishment is maintained. So if you have whatever your 100% capacity is, you have to reduce that to 50%, and also establish a mechanism of how you're going to track the capacity requirements. They also provided a layout of recommendations that I will go into momentarily, but this is just an illustration for you to be able to visually see. And so making sure that it's important that you enforce these requirements as they have been issued. So what's important when you're opening is to develop a plan on how that is going to look like. Establishing protocols and procedures is going to be very critical as you are now engaging into reopening and transitioning, for those of you that have been doing outdoor dining, transitioning to expanding to indoor dining. You should have already designated a program administrator that's going to assist you with operations of these guidelines. You want to ensure that you have your certified food project manager license updated and posted where we can be able to see them when we conduct unannounced inspections or task force visits during this duration. We want to make sure that you have a training plan based guideline in place that's going to be consistent of these protocols that have been implemented. You want to make sure that you have all of the proper training for all employees, from server, hostesses, and waitresses, and to cooks, understanding all of these new guidelines. We want to again emphasize, as our host of our economic development department, Kathy Graves, just mentioned, please register. It is critical that we know that you are pre-registered, self-certified, and we recommend that you build confidence in customer confidence by posting that you have registered with the DECD at the state level. Facility operations, we ask that you ensure that you have the proper signage posted. It's very critical that you have the proper signage also placed where they are readily accessible and and readable. We recommend for those outdoor dining facilities that you utilize laminated posters so that you're not constantly having to reprint them. So what are those signs that we recommend that they are posted? First and foremost, you want to have social distancing protocols. CDC has wonderful posters in multiple languages that are readily available. You want to have cleaning and disinfecting protocols in place. We will be asking you, do you have these protocols in place? Because we want to make sure that you have these reopening rules, measures in place, and are readily available for inspectors to be able to access them. You want to have PPE. It is the employer's responsibility to have the proper personal protective equipment that is necessary for your employees. We encourage you, as you're doing an assessment and doing an assessment of readiness to reopen, if you do not have the prior PPE, we will be encouraging you to delay your opening so that you can ensure that you have the proper supplies that are necessary to ensure the health and safety of both your customers and your employees. We also ask that you monitor very closely. This is actually not a new rule. If any employee is sick, we ask you to please inform them to stay home, as that reduces the risk of any exposure. Especially now with the new opening, we ask that you maintain a log of making sure that you are doing a health and safety check of all of your employees. Because in the event that we need to do contact tracing, that'll be something that we will be asking for from the health department's end. We ask that the entire facility is disinfected thoroughly before reopening. Many of the indoor facilities have been closed or only open for takeout or curbside, so we ask that a proper disinfecting cleaning is conducted before your grand reopening on June 17th. So what does the inspection process look like? We want to make sure that you identify who the manager for the establishment is so that we can discuss the operation status with them. This is not a new protocol. This is standard protocols, but we want to just emphasize to our indoor restaurants facilities that are licensed by the health department that it's important that we have one identified person prepared for unannounced inspections or task force visits, that they're prepared to have a designated person to speak to us so that we are not disrupting your day-to-day operations, but being able to have a walkthrough with your designated manager. We want to make sure that you determine if all staff have been trained on the guidance. We will be asking those questions and making sure that the proper chemicals that are approved by EPA have been properly labeled as well. We want to ensure that you determine what the establishment's cleaning plan is and that you have a checklist, a daily checklist, so that you can be ensure that the person that's designated to clean has a daily checklist so that they do not miss a step for the cleaning protocol. And then also determine whether you have been self-certified. So we will be checking on the website to see if you have pre-registered, and then we will be looking for the proper signs to be posted on your establishments. For employee and health and safety, as I mentioned, you want to create an employee log. This log should be be a sign in and sign out daily. We also ask that when they arrive that there's temperature checks so that you know that if there is a temperature that you may have to send the employee home. Ensure that staff are familiar with the sign-in symptoms. So the sign-in symptoms are, again, posters that we recommend to be posted in work areas and in the front areas of customers. Those are, again, found at cdc.gov's website, and they're available in multiple languages. Ensure that staff who knows who to report to if they are showing any symptoms. So again, designated that program administrator within your establishment. If they should feel that they have any symptoms, they have a designated person or manager to report to. Employees must always follow the proper hand washing procedures. Hand washing procedures are actually not new for food establishments. You need to ensure that the proper hand washing signs and posters are readily available in the utility sink areas as well as the restrooms. It's very critical, especially now with reopening and trying to ensure the health and safety of our customers and staff, that the proper hand washing signs are up and that they're washing at least for 20 seconds with warm water. And so you want to make sure that it's easily accessible and that they have and is fully equipped with the proper hand disposable dryers or contactless trash cans. Kitchen areas and dining areas. We want to ensure that the proper temperatures are being kept in the freezer areas and thermometers are accessible for us to be able to determined. Many freezers have thermometers outside of the freezers. Those of the ones that do not, make sure that there's a thermometer inside the freezer that's easily accessible for an inspector or a task force team to be able to see, and that they're functionally properly and normally. We want to make sure that thermometers are also correctly placed for those for hot holding items, and that they're present when we are coming on site, and they should be calibrated and checked often. It is critical to emphasize that no residential equipment should be used. Only commercial proper freezers and other equipment should be used. So we ask you to please do an assessment of your establishment of the proper equipment. Food that is wholesome and not expired, make sure that you check for expiration of foods. Everything should be properly labeled. If you're preparing for the day, it should be dated and properly labeled. We'll be looking for that, and that it's stored properly. Food and chemicals should be kept separately, and food that is intended to be kept in safety cabinets should also be stored properly as well. We'll be looking for that. Water and plumbing should also be maintained, and that the lines are working properly. Please check those accordingly. Ensure that there's adequate supply of hot and cold water, and then all ice machines and soda guns have been cleaned and sanitized properly. We also ask for equipment of the 3 bay sinks. We'll be checking for the functionality of them and making sure that they are equipped and sanitized accordingly. Dishwashing machines should be also checked, and will also ensure that they're working properly. Sanitizer test strips must be available and appropriate for the sanitizer being used. And this applies for the 3 bay sink operational that we will be maintaining, that you should be maintaining. All surfaces, both food contact and non-food contact, need to be thoroughly clean. Ventilation rates are increased in the kitchen as much as possible. Kitchen workstation areas should be rearranged for the maximum social distancing, and try to ensure that staff are not facing each other. We also recommend staggered shifts as much as possible, and specific equipment has been assigned for each staff member. We ask that knives or other utilities be used for the designated staff and employee for that day. Ensure that there's proper floor markings and or other methods to ensure that social distancing is going to be maintained at least of 6 feet. Restrooms. We also want to ensure that restrooms are properly stocked and supplied. You should have a cleaning plan of your restroom readily available. You want to make sure that there's clear pathways established for social distancing markers for both your customers and staff should be present and visible. Cleaning and disinfecting products or disposable wipes should be readily available. Restrooms should be cleaned frequently, again, and having the schedule available where there's a daily staff member signing and initialing that they have cleaned the restroom frequently throughout the day. Use touchless appliances as much as possible. As we transition into inside dining areas, we want to emphasize that there is also social markings for customers and staff must be installed in those areas. Areas include entrance to the restaurants, lines to be seated, lines to make payments, lines to use the restroom, etc. Tables and seating arrangements needs to be 6 feet apart and maintained between each table. Customers, again, that are in groups must be seated less than 6 feet apart, and we want to make sure that there's any plexiglass in areas that need to be for customer safety and versus staff. And again, if you're going to be making any of those functional changes, our fire marshals maybe need to be contacted whenever you're going to be doing any barriers of construction inside of the facility, and you want to make sure that they're in compliance with the fire marshal's office. Establishments are also encouraged to use non-touch or disposable menus as much as possible, or laminated menus so that you can also disinfect them between customers. We also ask that you utilize touchless payments as much as possible, as well as trash cans. Indoor dining and ventilation is also a sorry, somehow got ahead of myself here. Indoor ventilation must be increased in dining areas. For those establishments that have central ventilation, you want to increase the amount of ventilation outside air is exchanged within the system. For those facilities where central ventilation is not used, we ask that window air conditioning units or unit ventilators, systems and blowers should be set on low speed and pointed away from room occupants to the extent possible. Ceiling fans should be adjusted to the fins and are rotating in the direction that draws air up toward the ceiling rather than down to the occupants. Window fans should be turned to the exhaust air out of the window in the direction of the outdoors. Window fans that blow air into a room or a freestanding fan that only serves to circulate existing air around the room should not be used. Bar seating. Bar seating is only permitted if there is no active workers behind the bars. There should be a physical barrier, for example, a plexiglass separating customers from the bar space. Parties must be seated that are seated at the bars must be maintained within 6 feet distance from other parties. Live performances are allowed. Performers are exempt from wearing a mask or face covering when they're performing and should be at least 12 feet from the nearest person, including other performers. Staff must wear face masks at all times and face coverings at all times. Latex-free gloves should be worn by table servers and must be replaced frequently. And we ask that they should be discarded often between serving different customers. Customers must wear a mask and face covering when not dining. So therefore, if the customer is dining, they're eating, it's okay. If they need to use the restroom, they need to get up, put their mask on and walk to the restroom. Hand sanitizers should be available at the front entrance and in common areas. Condiments should either be pre-packaged or served in pre-portioned individual containers. And signage for postage of where customers can file any concerns that they have should be posted. Again, this is another posting saying that they can report violations to 211. We are not allowing buffets at this time. There are no salad bars permissible at this time, and there is no self-serving of beverages or fountain drinks at this time. In closing, you want to assess readiness to reopen. These are the new rules. They're also, the reopening guide is also available on the DECD website. Please make sure, again, to self-certify and post the necessary posters, and train your staff and appoint an administrator to help implement these new rules. Post all necessary safety signs and inspect unannounced inspections and or task force visits. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to our host, either Steve Fontana or Kathy Graves. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Maritza. And I'd like to now ask our city building official, Jim Tercio, if he has any particular tips or guidelines or instructions he'd like to share with all of the attendees. Jim?
Unmute. All right. Thank you, Steve. Maritza did a fantastic job there. The only thing I want to just really tell you, self-certified, because last Friday we went out on task force. We were 9 different establishments and not one was self-certified. Please take the time and get self-certified before we open or move on to phase 2. And we're out there. If you have any questions, feel free to call us. If you need help setting anything up, call us. We'll come out and take a look. We'll help you. That's what we're here for. That's about all I got, Steve.
Thank you, Jim, very much. And before we go to questions, I'd just like to ask Jennifer Forsland of the fire department if she has any general tips or guidance or requests to make. Jennifer?
Yes. Hi, good morning, everyone. So I think Maritza actually hit a lot of things, addressed a lot of issues. For instance, about any kind of construction or work that's done, and make sure they reach out to the building department and the fire marshal's office. In addition, for my office moving forward with phase 2, the state is offering an online webinar for inspections during COVID-19. That should be able to help us going forward in this next phase to safely do inspections that are state mandated. I don't know if anybody has any questions for me.
All right, Jennifer, thank you very much. For some reason, I'm not showing people on my screen, so I'm going to go ahead and put up Kathy's general information on the categories here for something more appealing to look at than a blank screen. Before we get to the questions, just a couple of things. Again, please put your questions in the chat box. We'll call on you in order. Secondly, Maritza, will your presentation be available afterward for dissemination?
Absolutely.
Okay, very good. First question is, and just to reiterate, we are recording this video and audio, and that will be available to those who request it as well. First question is from Carmela. Carmela asks, and this might be for Kathy or Maritza, is the self-certification badge voluntary or required?
It is voluntary. The signs that are accompanied with them are required. And then the other signs that I mentioned during the presentations are also required. But the badge is voluntary. Signing up and pre-registering is not. So we ask people to at least self-certify, because before we come out, we can know that you've at least self-certified.
Great, thank you, Maritza. I now have two questions from Dan. The first question is, does Dan need to contact anyone to inform them that he is intending to reopen for indoor dining?
He should ensure that his license has been renewed and that he submitted the proper application to the health department and went through the proper signatory.
Great, thank you, Maritza. Dan had a bonus question, and that was, have the guidelines for not allowing lines been removed as long as patrons are at least 6 feet apart?
The guidelines require markers.
They require markers, but can there be lines, so to speak? Or is that, as long as they're 6 feet apart, a line is okay?
Yes.
Okay. All right, wonderful. Claire has a question regarding airflow and plexiglass panels separating staff from customers at the counter. How high must those panels be? And will the height impede our airflow at all?
You want to just make sure that there's a safe distance between you, the customer, and the staff person. So, I've seen, like 4 feet plexiglass, so it really depends on the station that you have in front of you.
Okay. Looking for, I think we're out of questions at this point. While we wait for some more questions, let me go back to Maritza just briefly. So Maritza, when we talk about, let's just say, categories that we didn't cover in depth necessarily in the first half hour, anything specific to nail salons, tattoo parlors, or those sort of gym, fitness centers, yoga studios that might
yes,
not
I
have...
can actually transition to the next sector.
Oh,
if that's
then please
permissible.
do that.
Before we do that, I have a couple of questions here from Camilla. She asked, what is a sanitizer test strip? She didn't understand that in your presentation, and where do you go to get the 211 signage?
So the 211 signage can be created, and the test strips are standard food establishment required test strips to ensure that the water is, chemicals are correct. And so you want to ensure that you connect with your qualified food operator and manager within your establishment. It's a standard requirement.
Thank you.
Okay, and then one more here before we move on, Maritza. Can someone add plexiglass panels over the counters in lieu of sneeze guards over the display counter? Does that make sense?
It would depend on how the facility looks. I mean, I think Jen and I can certainly assess your establishment. Unless I really see what the establishment looks like, it's really hard for me to answer that question.
Okay, great. Why don't we go ahead then to the next cluster of categories or industries, Maritza?
Yeah, so I have them separated by sectors. So just wanted to make sure that I had the PowerPoint sort of separated by sectors, and then hopefully there's different sectors here. So let's see, I'm going to go to the next one. Do we want to cover, I have nail salons I can cover next.
Nail salons.
Sure.
Okay, great. And then we'll go from there. So let me just share my screen again. Just looking for.
I'll stop sharing, and I think that should make it easier for me.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Because there you go.
There you go.
All right. So here we are. And so for the nail salon reopening inspection process. So of course, the nail salons have been patiently waiting for personal services to open. So thank you all for your patience and being flexible, and hopefully that allowed for some ample time for preparing for your reopening. Similar to the prior presentation, we want to talk about the reopening requirements, what's required for the personal services, and what does the inspection procedures look like, and talk about the health and safety measures for both customers and staff. So again, the disclaimer that we have all indicated, please self-certify as soon as possible. You are number one, building customer confidence, and then number two, saying you are ready for reopening rules. And so this really makes it helpful both at the state level and at the local level. So what are some key points that I want to stress with the nail salons? So the key thing here is that as with other sectors, you can only have 50% of capacity of your limits of serving your customers. It is by appointment only, so your visits should be one-on-one. No waiting rooms are accessible at this time. They should remain closed. And we want to ensure that you have a poster outside that if a customer does not have a mask, they cannot be served. And this is really critical with many other sectors. When we're going out doing task force visits, we've noticed that there's some leniency around that. It is critical for the protection of your employees and that of your customer to ensure that they're wearing a mask. No mask, no service. PPE, again, is going to be required when providing services. Again, you want to have some eye protection. You want to have a face mask or a cloth face covering that is completely covering the nose and mouth so that you have no entryway of potential exposure. Gloves are optional depending on the type of service that you're providing, and they should be changed between customers. Gowns and capes, depending on what you're servicing, should be changed also between customers. Eyewear, gloves and eyewear are required when using cleaning chemicals. That it actually applies for every single sector. So when you're using cleaning chemicals, make sure that you're wearing the proper protective equipment. Customers are required to bring and wear face masks, again, that is covering both their nose and mouth. You want to develop a cleaning plan similar to every sector. You make sure that you're training your employees of the reopening rules, the cleaning protocols, and ensure that you're having refresher trainings weekly so that you can ensure that they're being complied. You want to do burn rate assessments of the PPE, thoroughly cleaning your facility before reopening, and maintaining an employee log in the event for health and safety in the event that we ever have to do contact tracing and someone becomes ill of COVID-19 symptoms. And you want to try to stagger shift as much as possible and allow for enough break times so that you can have the proper distance between customers and your employees. This is a layout that the reopening state guide provided, and so it was a really great layout, and so please assess this at your leisure of the different ways that you are recommended to have layout. So let's talk a little bit about the physical setup. Signs, again, should be posted. We highly recommend to have self-certified badge on on your display window. Why is this important? Because you're going to build confidence of customers, allowing them to know that you're following the new rules. We are trying to, as you know, the economy has taken a toll on all of the different sectors. And so as you're reopening, you want to build that confidence for customers knowing that your establishment is following these new rules. You want to do appointments only. Social distancing, cleaning protocols, all that should be in place and properly posted. PPE should be posted saying that it's required for both your customers and your staff. Employees should remain home and should be encouraged to remain home if they're sick with any type of symptoms, respiratory symptoms. Customers should not enter if experiencing any of these symptoms. And again, the 211 state hotline to reopen should be designed and readily printed and available for your customers. Someone asked a question about front desk setup. It is important for you to do an assessment of what the proper plexiglass barrier that needs to be installed will be required. Contactless payments as much as possible. Should you need the plexiglass or other contactless payment not available, please sanitize between the disinfect between the customers so that you can have as much as possible the equipment disinfected. Any non-essential items should be removed, magazine, pamphlets, etc. Self-service amenities such as coffee and water, unfortunately, needs to be removed. Make sure you have a separate entry and exit point so that it could be clear and there's a safe distance between customers. And ventilation, again, is similar to every other sector. Increase ventilation as much as possible, increase the flow of outdoor air. Windows and AC should have maximized air intake as much as possible, and the ceiling fans. And then do not use freestanding fans that only circulate existing air around a specific room. Make sure you have discrete work zone between each of the employees. Have the workstation staggered at least 6 feet apart. Social distancing markers should be visible, and also having the proper sanitizer and disinfectants available. Do not have any shared equipment. Make sure that they're clean between each use. Touchless appliances, again, closing all of the waiting rooms that are available. And laundry, please make sure that the linens are cleaned and laundered within your facility or by a cleaning service, and have them covered and protected at all times. Employees and customers. So let's talk a little bit about employees. Ensuring that you provide the proper PPE, log, again, daily health checks, stagger shift as much as possible, having the training provided, and also ensure that they are not sharing equipment. Must wear eye protection and face mask and face cover. Gloves are optional depending on the service. When they're cleaning with chemicals, they should be worn. And then they should also ensure that the gowns and capes are changed between customers depending on the services that they're receiving. For customers, have appointments only and have them staggered so that it gives you enough time to clean in between the customers. Try to ensure that you have appointments, one-on-one visits. Do not exceed the 50% capacity of your facility. Wear a mask at all times, and services that require to remove masks cannot be performed at this time. And then again, gowns and caps should be maintained. Cleaning and disinfecting protocols, again, I want to just emphasize they should be maintained. And then waxing services should be adhered to with the cleaning and the proper disinfectants. Nail surfaces, again, should be all disinfected. You should make sure that the disinfectants are cleaned and maintained at the in between customers, and also at the end of the day, any disinfecting jars are disposed of and refilled. What should you expect as an inspection for? And this is an example inspection form of what we will be doing. This presentation will be readily available. This inspection form can also be found on ct.gov. And in closing, you want to do a full assessment on your readiness to reopen. If you cannot supply any of these new reopening, we are recommending that you delay opening. You want to ensure that you self-certified. You train your staff and appoint an administrator, and post all necessary safety signs, and expect any unannounced inspections from our sanitarian teams or the task force visits. And then that concludes my talking points for the nail salon sectors, and we can turn it over back to Steve Fontana or Kathy Graves to facilitate the Q&A.
Thanks, Maritza. We do just have one more question right now, and that is, do the line guidelines that you've been talking about apply to all businesses? In other words, are they consistent from industry to industry in terms of allowing lines, but requiring that everybody stay at least 6 feet apart?
Yes, they are consistent.
Okay, wonderful. I don't see any more questions at this time, so why don't we go ahead to the next presentation that you've got?
All right, let's talk about tattoo parlors, and then alrighty, slideshow. And so the tattoo parlors, there's a lot of consistent rules about cleaning and maintaining. So I'll try to go through them relatively quickly. We want to talk about the reopening requirements and procedures for inspections. I think that's usually critical for our different sectors. Disclaimer, certify. I think we are just trying to really push this message today because we want to make sure that business self-certify and then also post the proper signage. The same rules apply for the tattoo sectors: 50% capacity, appointments only, one-on-one services, no waiting rooms allowed, and services that require any removal of the mask cannot be performed at this juncture. PPE is required both for the customers and the employees that are similar to the key points that I mentioned. And so I will not go into that in depth. Reopening, cleaning plans should be in place. Training, again, should be in place. Thorough cleaning of your entire facility. Logging of each of the different restroom cleans, and that you're logging your employee logs, and staggering shifts as much as possible. The personal services guide is again at ct.gov, and they have a great layout of suggestions that you should be setting up your facilities. The physical setup for the tattoo parlors are similar to the other sectors, having specific entry and exit points, having the proper signage, and the proper ventilation that I indicated previously. Appointments should be pre-scheduled, no overlapping between customers, and the treatment rooms, alternate rooms to ensure that there's no two customers being treated at the same time. Ensure that there's enough time between customers to clean and disinfect the room or disinfect the workstation. You want to maintain, again, the proper social distancing of 6 feet, install any physical barriers or plexiglass where possible. I actually happened to visit a tattoo facility, and they had shower curtains between the workstations that were plastic and able to be wiped down. So, you know, there are different measures that people are utilizing to ensure the health and safety between the workstations. Customers should wait in the car until their appointment is ready. And then you also want to make sure that you remove any non-essential items as indicated. Please do not share any equipment. We are encouraging that you have your own equipment and that they're not shared, disinfecting them as much as possible, having touchless appliances as much as possible. And laundry, again, laundry needs to be maintained and utilized with the proper laundry disinfectants. And you also want to make sure that they're properly labeled and that they're stored properly. Cleaning is so critical for ensuring that we maintain our COVID-19 cases a downward trend. And so we are emphasizing cleaning in all of our different presentations because it's so critical to ensure that hand sanitizers are in the entry points and in common areas, disinfecting, hand washing for your customers, and having the proper posters. As well as for your employees, ensuring that the proper markers for the entry point are again visible, and in making sure that it's at least for 20 seconds and that you have the water temperatures that are necessary. Hot water is essential for your establishment to be able to operate. We will be checking for water temperatures. Again, doing the sanitation on the stools, the workstations, cabinets, any touch surfaces. And then in closing, just assess your readiness for reopening, self-certify, training your staff, posting the necessary signs, and also expecting an unannounced inspection for task force visits or sanitarians. It's really critical for us to emphasize that message so that you know that we will be coming out as each of the different phases occur, because we want to make sure that, number one, we're working with you to provide education, and number two, we want to make sure the health and safety of the customers as much as possible. If I can, with your permission, we'll transition over to the next sector, which is gyms.
Yes, please do, Maritza.
And
we already have a question about massages. Will massages be allowed in spas?
There we go. We're about to cover that right now.
Good.
And so the next sector that's going to be allowed to reopen, can everyone see the presentation?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's just really, again, talking about the sports facilities, the sports pools, and the massage. You can certainly, that is part of personal services. Sorry, so let me answer that before we get into the sports facility. You are going to be able to do that. It's by appointment only, and you need to make sure that you are, number one, following the proper protocols as personal services. So the presentation that I just presented covers that component. And so you have to clean and maintain the spa table at this time. However, steam rooms are not allowed at this juncture. So if you, within your spa services, if you offer steam room services, they're not allowed at this juncture. So again, key points: self-certify, make sure that you're maintaining 50% of your capacity. All employees are required to wear the proper PPE, customers as well, making sure that the 6 feet social distancing are maintained, and then also maintaining the proper space between equipment. And so we'll talk about that now. So class instructors do not need to wear a cloth face covering when they're at least 12 feet apart from teaching. Otherwise, it is essential to wear that. Cloth face covering should be worn throughout the pool facility, with the exception of while swimming and showering. And so we'll talk about intraday cleaning. Employees should clean equipment frequently and between customers. They must wipe down the equipment after each use, including the free weights. Customers required to bring their own water bottles. So, you know, water fountains has been a popular question. We are asking individuals to, they can be used only to fill a water bottle. They should not be utilizing it to sip from the water fountain, for example. Every other or every third locker should be disabled and marked accordingly. So we are asking that 6 feet social distancing between lockers are also properly marked. This is an example of sports clubs and complexes gyms recommendations from the DECD, and doing the capacity tracking, self-certifying, and this is an illustration of what we are discussing today. Reopening, making sure that, again, this sector also needs to maintain the proper cleaning plan and training, designating an administrator, ensuring that they provide PPE for their employees, thorough cleaning of the entire facility and equipment, maintaining a log that is so critical for us in contact tracing, meaning if someone tests positive, so that we can be able to maintain a log of both the customers that are coming in for gym services and they're using the badges coming in, as well as having cohort between groups if they're doing small groups teaching, and then as well as your employees by shift. That is very critical, because then we can be able to do cohorting and be able to isolate and quarantine the individuals that may test positive or may be exposed to someone that tested positive. So the physical space setup, again, You want to have the proper signage as every other sector, that you, if you're sick, you should be staying home, that customers needs to wear the proper mask in the different designated areas. Also that 211 that gives them the right for, if they want to report any violations. You want to increase the ventilation areas, very similar to every single sector. Do not use freestanding fans that only circulate, again, existing air. That's very critical. Physical setup, we want to make sure that there's proper markers within the facility. The layout is maintained within 6 feet. There is a thorough cleaning plan frequently within the gyms, and that the free weights required, that they're cleaned as well. Exercise that requires spotter cannot be conducted at this time. You want to have discrete employee work zones, touchless appliances as much as possible. Non-essential amenities should be removed. Front desk should have plexiglass or similar type barrier as every other sector. Again, the locker rooms need to be every other locker room that maintains the proper social distancing. Water fountains should be water fill only. Concession stands are allowed but must follow the sector rules for restaurants. They need to be also licensed. And prepackaged food and drinks that does not need to follow the sector rules for restaurants. Additional services, tanning beds must be thoroughly cleaned in between each use. Hot tubs, 50% capacity, and making sure the proper posting are at the hot tub areas. Outdoor classes, they should follow the proper social distancing at all times, and they should, customers should schedule to participate in the class so you can know that you're meeting those capacities. The same goes for indoor classes, making sure that you have enough and sufficient time to clean in between those classes. The pools, we license pools within the city of New Haven. Make sure that you have and maintain the proper chlorine residual, minimum bromine residual, minimum chlorine residual. So if you haven't had your pools inspected, make sure that they get inspected and that are properly maintained, because we will be coming out to do licensing for those pools that require licensing. They again require 50% capacity, because we know that cloth coverings are worn within the facility, but the exception is when they're swimming. We ask that you try to alternate the one lap between the customers. If you're teaching a class at pools session, we ask that there is proper distance between the instructor and the students. Arrive in swimming suits. There should be signs posted that anyone that's going to should shower before they arrive to the facility. Modify the layout with the proper social distancing, and make sure that you have the proper barriers. Again, 1 swimmer per lane for lap swimming. And again, for the swimming lessons, as I mentioned, make sure that there's, if there's any physical contact required, it's not permissible at this time. And no shared objects. There are no exceptions. No one should be sharing any personal or facial items with each other. No goggles, snorkels, toys, or floating devices. Cleaning and disinfecting, again, making sure that you have the hand sanitizer at the entryways and in common areas. Cleaning and disinfecting as much as possible. The hand washing signs are critical. They should be available again in common areas, and the hand washing should be posted in the restrooms and in areas where they'll be washing their hands. We also encourage that you have a log for the cleaning in an accessible area where we can see that they have been done. The restrooms, again, the lodge needs to be maintained. You need to utilize and follow CDC and EPA guidelines with cleaning and disinfecting. Lifeguards should wear surgical style masks, cloth masks, or other face covering their nose and mouth at all times. Remove any face coverings when swimming is allowed. Visitors or friends or off-duty lifeguards should not be within 6 feet of the lifeguard. It's important to watch the swimmers in the pool so that you can enforce the social distancing. So those that are lifeguards are so critical to make sure that they're following these social distancing requirements. and that lifeguards should also delineate using cones or lines. If one lifeguard is on duty or workers in isolated workstations, face coverings are not required. If the lifeguard is working in an isolated area, they do not need a face covering. However, if they're working in teams and they're not going to be able to be social distancing, they require a facial mask. And so in summary, again, as the other sectors, assess your readiness for reopen, make sure that you're self-certifying, make sure you have the proper training and ongoing training, have an appointed administrator so that they can follow these new opening rules, download the guidance from the DECD website, post all the necessary signs. Many of them are on the cdc.gov website in multiple languages. And again, most importantly, expect unannounced inspections and or task force visits. And we're here at your service to provide education from both the fire marshals, the building, and the health department to help you and assist you with a successful reopening. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Maritza. We're coming up close to the end of the hour that we projected for the webinar. I've got one question, and I do want to ask Jim Tercio and Jennifer Forslund if they have any other comments they'd like to offer. But I wanted to ask the question, which is, do employees need to have regular logged temperature screenings, Maritza?
Yes.
Okay. That's very good. Jim and Jennifer, any other opportunities to offer any other comments, perhaps, since we asked you earlier? Oh, maybe, maybe not. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions from members of the attendees. So at this point, what I'd like to just again reiterate is that we will be making available audio and video files for those of you who would like them after the end of this webinar. I see many members of the media here with us, and we thank you for joining us. So please feel free to email me. I will type my email address into the chat box now, and you can please feel free just to email me with your request. In addition, Maritza has offered to make her presentation that she just made today available in PDF or other forms. So I'll ask her to email me those, and I'll be able to ship those out to you as well. As Kathy indicated, we have the links to both the self-certification online at DECD, as well as the state rules for phase 1 and phase 2 businesses. And obviously, if your business or sector wasn't covered in this webinar, please feel free to reach out to us if you have any specific questions that we can try to help you answer. Okay. I'm not seeing any other questions at this point. So Kathy or Maritza, any final comments before we close?
I just want to add, just know that we're here to help you. So if you have any questions, feel free to contact any of us.
Right, and just to Kathy's point, I do want to mention to all of you that Mike Piscatelli, the city's economic development administrator, joined us for a lot of this call. And there were other members of our team who were on the call as well. Clay Williams, Jerry Garcia, Anna Nieves-Wynn, maybe even some others. So we've had a lot of people participate, and we're very eager to help you if you have questions. With that, again, I put my email address up for you. Please feel free to email me if you would like copies of the presentations or the audio video files, or if you have any questions or any other documents we can share with you. At this point, Kathy, Maritza, I think we're all set. So
yes, thank you everyone for participating, and we wish you much success as you reopen phase 2.
Absolutely.
Right. And as Jim Tercio said, make sure you self-certify using the link that Kathy shared with you. And until next time, I'm Steve Fontana. Again, thank you so much. Have a good rest of the day. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.